right. Julia Cheek, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, likewise. I'm very excited to have you on. It's been a while since we've connected, right?
Yes, a little while.
So,
Although you've been a great fan since early days.
Yeah, so I wanted to catch people up to speed that may not know our relationship back in the day when you guys kind of first started. We had got connected through my brother who lives out there and worked with you guys early on in your early phase. And it's so cool to see how you guys have evolved, what you've done with EverlyWell. We'll get into Shark Tank in a little bit. But first, let's get to know you. Like, where did this idea come from? And tell us about your background that led you down this path of where EverlyWell is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, I am not a healthcare expert, and I didn't come from a healthcare background. And that actually is something that I think has given me a bit of an idealistic advantage into starting a company that probably most people in healthcare would have shied away from because it's really hard. But I was in management consulting, had a really traditional kind of business career for a long time, had gone to business school, had a great corporate development job at a public company. And I ended up in this position where I was feeling really terrible. I had gone to a ton of doctors. I had corporate insurance that was a high deductible plan. And all these doctors, I went through this odyssey where they all ran all these different lab tests. And I spent this 6-month period of just feeling awful and not having a clear diagnosis and not having really clear symptoms to try to work with typical physicians. And at the end of all that, I really had no additional information and yet started receiving all these lab bills. And I just thought, I have zero value out of this process. I don't even have my lab results to even take to another doctor or even have in my file. And I'm now getting hit with all these lab bills that my insurance didn't cover. And it ended up costing me over $2,000. And I just sat back and I thought, if there was ever a time to build a consumer company around healthcare and provide a much needed innovation on a really dated and archaic industry that everybody needs to use, it's this. And so I actually kind of took some steps and quit my corporate job pretty quickly to think about how to build a company that made lab testing accessible, affordable, and actually useful for people, and really for mass market, not just for quantified selfers, but for anyone in the country who wants to have access to, a cholesterol test or another type of test that they need to get on a regular basis.
Yeah, that is, first of all, an amazing story, and I think it's really powerful as well. Did you grow up with an entrepreneurial mindset? Because that's basically, in a nutshell, what an entrepreneur is. They see this demand, they want to fix something, and then boom, they quit their day job and they go create this company, and now it's massively successful. Where did that mentality come from?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when I retell it because it sounds so somewhat stereotypical,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Of the entrepreneur. And I wasn't the entrepreneur at age 5, starting a lemonade stand. I always was just starting these businesses was really not me.
Yeah.
But I did always have activities that I think were very independent and off the beaten path. I was competing in horses when the rest of my friends were cheerleading and, was often very independent. I'm an only child and made choices that I felt were the right decisions for me, no matter what anyone else thought. And I think when I was in business school, I was surrounded by a number of really impressive people who were also entrepreneurs. And I was able to sort of understand that you can actually make a career out of being an entrepreneur. And it was at that point, which was actually 5 years before I started EverlyWell, but it was at that point that I knew I wanted to start a company. But it took me 5 years to find this idea that look, businesses are not built overnight, as you well know. This is a long-term commitment. It is a slog, and it has to be something that I felt was fundamentally transformational for American healthcare for me to really want to quit my job and to invest all of my time and effort into this idea. And so when I had this personal experience and sort of looked at the market, I felt like this was my chance. And so I took the leap.
Gotcha. So let's talk about that transition really quick, because a lot of people, and me included, when I switched over to Fit2Fat2Fit from my day job in the medical field, a lot of people are scared to make that jump. What was it that gave you that courage? Did you have already a financial, you were financially sound at the time? You're okay, I can take this much risk. I have 6 months to figure it out. What was it that gave you the courage to actually pull the trigger on that? Because I think that's what stops a lot of people. I got the salary coming in. I'm pretty good. I don't need to take any more risks.
Yeah, and it's a really good point because I was not in a really stable place to make this decision. I mean, I had gotten married a year before. in 2014, when I got married, my husband wanted to start a company and I had the stable corporate job. So I said, fine, quit your job, start a company. He had no salary.
Gotcha.
So we had this plan all worked out. And a year into our plan, I came to him and said, I want to also quit my job. So it was somewhat, something that some people would view as pretty irresponsible. I mean, we had bought a house 12 months before. We sold our house. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. I mean, we made a lot of moves that were just what we had to do in order for me to be able to pursue this dream, given that he had previously also quit his job to bootstrap a company. So it was maybe not the ideal time, but the fundamental thing for me that I mentally couldn't get over was I was 30 years old. I was working in a great job, but I thought if I didn't try this, I would regret it the rest of my life. And I put it in the context of what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is it fails and I have to go back and get another job.
Yeah.
And I was never worried that I would not be able to go back and get another job. I was worried if this was what I'm going to do for the next 20 years in corporate America, what I'm going to have really missed out on.
Yeah.
And so I chose to sort of put all those fears aside. Now, we also made responsible financial decisions in the context of the situation we were in. We didn't just continue sort of acting like we were living on 2 salaries, right? So you have to balance it, but it was a lot harder. I mean, like, just to be honest, your first year of marriage, having 2 people quit their jobs to start companies, like, we pretended to be like cool and like didn't need money. And like, that probably was not the most responsible choice. But we got through it, and like, we're in a really great place now where he sold his business and then I'm obviously still in the early stages, and it's just a little bit of give and take. You have to make it work and prioritize different needs at different points in your life.
Okay. I love that. Before we get into EverlyWell, did you ever find out what was wrong with you? Would you ever get to that point, the diagnosis?
Yes. So after a GI doctor, a rheumatologist, a neurologist, a musculoskeletal kind of back and neck doctor, a urologist, I called everyone. I got all my lab results. I had to do extensive follow-up to do that. Some of them were mailed to me. I took them all to a functional medicine doctor and to an acupuncturist. And I was super deficient on B12, magnesium, vitamin D, B6, iron. And then last but not least, my cortisol had completely gone haywire and I had adrenal gland fatigue. So it was really a set of issues that were complicated for traditional medicine to diagnose. But if I had had that information, I went on kind of a 3 and 6 month plan to get my levels all back in the right place. It really can affect your health substantially, but it's not that difficult or expensive to fix once you have a plan.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's actually very common, those things that you're deficient in. A lot of Americans are deficient in those things. So interesting. Let's talk about EverlyWell. What was the birth of EverlyWell? Where did that name come from? Yeah. And let's talk about your early days of because you said you didn't really have any experience in this field. How did you make it work?
Yeah, so came up with the name EverlyWell because I wanted something that represented a lifestyle and wellness brand, but that also had medical credibility. We have always been consumer first. Everything we do is about delivering an exceptional consumer experience, which is not usually the case in healthcare. So we didn't want something that was just like test from home, right? Or something that was non-descriptive that we couldn't build a brand around. So that's sort of where EverlyWell was born. And just to be really practical about it, as you know, online marketing, it matters if you can achieve SEO rankings. It matters how differentiated your URL is. And it was something that was differentiated enough where I felt like we could build a really credible marketing machine. So that was kind of a second tier factor in naming it. And, I think in those early days, look, I had been in a corporate environment and management consulting at a senior level position at a public company. I had always been driving towards, I had a team reporting to me, I had a boss. And in those very early days, you start on day one, nothing happens unless you do it. And it was a very interesting realization for me that everything was on my shoulders and I had no healthcare experience. And I started, I just sort of centered myself and said, okay, what is the next thing I have to do for a door to open? And if that door opens, I can walk through it, but I can't get anything else done if I don't make that happen. And for me in those first early months, it was finding a medical director. finding a little bit of money to hire that medical director, and then getting lab contracts in place.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you, when I called up labs and said, hey, I'm building this company, I have no healthcare experience, and I want to sell lab testing to consumers so that they can get value out of it at lower prices, no lab would talk to me. But as soon as I was able to hire that medical director, every lab would talk to him. And so it's just about sort of sequencing things in a way to say, what is the one essential thing that I need to be able to solve in order to get to the next step? And that really helps simplify it, because if you think too far down the line or too big, it gets overwhelming. It's too overwhelming to think about the next step.
Yeah, there's so many names of past entrepreneurs in history that, because people think they need to know how to do this in order to be successful. The knowing the how part isn't the problem for people. You'll figure that part out. You look at Andrew Carnegie or Elon Musk, these people sometimes that have no idea what the industry consists of, but then they figure out a way to make it super successful. And so you're a great example of that. And I love that. It's such a great story for people to hear, to give them that inspiration or courage if they want to do something. They think, well, I have to know exactly how to do it before I do it. And that's not the case. Like, if you have your vision and you know your why and you're passionate about it, the how is going to figure itself out. So I love hearing that. So okay, the idea of actually in-home medical testing was like, where did that come from? Is that something that you wanted to create with EverlyWell? And was that because of your experience, because of all the cost of the lab tests you had to do?
Yeah, I mean, how we designed the initial vision, which is largely still what it is today, was I thought about, frankly, all the women in my cohort and generation who were 30 to 40, had, either kids at home or were working demanding careers, who literally could not make it to a lab if they tried. Yeah. And when they did, started continuously getting billed at all these higher costs. And so our goal was to always focus on three things: convenience, access, and value from the results. And so we really honed in early on at-home testing and felt that it would be a huge differentiator for us, and it has been, instead of just matching people to draw centers, because the compliance in the US of people actually getting their testing done and going to a draw center is abysmally low. Yeah. And we also knew that if we were going to really radically transform this, we're in a new generation, we still were 3 years ago, where consumers expect a seamless experience a la Uber or Amazon. Healthcare is going local. We're going back to kind of the subscription milk delivery that we had all those decades ago. Yeah. And to think that we were going to be able to radically transform a really dated industry and not bring that to consumers in home, I think would have just been a complete mismatch. So we've been steadfast on that since the beginning, and have remained that way. And every product that we launch is validated and designed to be for home collection.
Yeah. And I love that, because, when I first met you guys, I thought it was such a genius idea, because even for me in the health and fitness industry, I would try and get people to go out there and get their blood testing done. But I'll be totally honest with you. The reason I did it so often was because doctors offered it to me, right? It was free. But your average person to have to pay that much money to go get it tested, to go into the lab, draw all that blood, go back, you meet with your doctor, he'll interpret the results for you, take this prescription, take that prescription. You're like, all right, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. Even for me, myself, I'm like, man, it's inconvenient for me. And here I am, a health and fitness professional, and we are a society of convenience. And so you've done an awesome job with making it more convenient. I guess some questions from some people that have asked me about you guys is, how does your blood testing compared to traditional lab testing? Are the results accurate? Those are some concerns that some followers have, and that's what they want to know from you.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and one that we expect our customers to ask us. Yeah. And we have always prioritized compliance and accuracy as number one since the beginning. And here's in general something to know about lab testing is, you cannot. So our sample collection methods right now are urine, saliva, swab, and then finger prick blood spot testing. So most people understand urine and saliva. Most of their questions around accuracy are around the blood testing. Yeah. And one thing to note is that you can test in as accurate and sometimes more accurate of a way hundreds of hormones using dried blood spot testing, hundreds of markers. That being said, you cannot test everything. You cannot fully replace the lab menu. And there are certain markers that, due to sample stability and how you have to analyze that particular marker, that cannot be tested using that method. We don't offer those markers.
Okay.
So yes, there are some limitations. The labs that we work with, so we work with a network of about 10 labs around the country, all of whom have predated EverlyWell and work with physicians and hospitals as well, and really view us as their consumer engine. And so all of them are not only compliant with federal regulations around both accuracy and process, but they're also past our EverlyWell quality standards that we've implemented, which in fact are above and beyond what is expected by the federal government. So everything is validated with that collection method. It is within the variability standards for blood draw method, or just intra-lab variability, which exists in general, and are entirely accurate. So we actually have been excited because more and more doctors are referring their patients to us proactively because of the cost. And it's been a great validation of just being able to say, look, like, we work with labs that your physicians work with already.
Gotcha.
And that's how we do the testing. And actually, I think it's a great advantage for us because from an innovation standpoint, when there's a new proprietary test out, when there's a new collection method, we are able to work with those leading companies to bring that directly to consumers, even though we don't create the testing ourselves. We just partner and then we're able to distribute it. So the labs like it because they don't want to build consumer businesses. We like it because we get access to the best products out there and the best relationships.
Gotcha. Can you specify which markers you guys can't test? Are you allowed to talk about specifics?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of them. For example, we can't today replace an entire CBC panel.
Okay.
Like, we don't have the technology yet. Our labs don't have the technology to do that. Like, do I think that innovation will happen in the next 5 years? Absolutely. And we hope to be first to the table to partner with an organization to offer that. We are not in the business of R&D. We are in the business of, being able to work with leading lab partners to create an entire consumer experience and make it accessible for people to use their tests.
Awesome. Love that. Can you tell us the story of you guys getting on Shark Tank? How did that happen? How did it go? What were your expectations? Were your expectations met? Like, what were some surprises? Can you tell us all about that?
Yeah, so Shark Tank was, first of all, an incredibly positive experience for me and for the company. Just the way that the entire show is handled, I think, is a really, really positive, uplifting experience for entrepreneurs. And I'm super grateful to ABC and to Lori for the opportunity that we've had there. So, I mean, but it is a process. And, I think it takes a lot of grit to get through it. One of the traits of many entrepreneurs. And we started the process in March of 2017. Okay. Ended up airing in the night before Cyber Monday, over Thanksgiving weekend in November of 2017. So my entire team canceled their Thanksgiving holidays to be here. It was incredible. Wow. And the entire process took kind of that, 7 months or so, 7 to 8 months. And it's a constant process where you have to say, my likelihood of making it to each step in the process, my likelihood is so low. Yeah. But I ultimately felt for EverlyWell, your audience, Drew, I think better understands the options around lab testing and sort of how do you take that data and use it as part of your lifestyle or dietary changes. The broad American public has no idea that they're able to often get tests more affordably, more conveniently, and results that they can use with their doctor. Like, this is just an entirely new product introduction. And so I felt really strongly that the best way to educate people about both EverlyWell, but just this entire model, was through a mass market opportunity. And then I also felt that there were certain sharks that could really add credibility and materially help EverlyWell along from a product marketing standpoint. And, my target sharks in the process were Mark Cuban and Lori Grenier. And then, of course, I ended up getting a deal with Lori.
Yep. That's right. That was awesome. Were you nervous at all? Like, was it hard to be, grilled by some of the sharks, or how was that process? Are you okay being on stage like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody is prepared for that, right? I mean, the amount of pressure. So, you can read all this online, but you walk onto the mat in Shark Tank, they start the cameras rolling, and they don't stop. So it is very real. The sharks don't know who you are. It is very real. They start rolling the cameras, and until you walk out of the tank, anything is fair game. And so, obviously you see edited portions of the pitch, but you have to be prepared for any question that they throw at you. Your pitch has to be delivered perfectly. And the amount of pressure, especially for me with EverlyWell was, I had a lot of investors, I had a lot of employees, and I wanted to do right by them in representing the company to the best of my ability. And I did have concerns. Look, I went to Harvard, the sharks don't love that typically. Yeah. I, had raised venture capital money, and there were a lot of things. I asked for a huge valuation. And all of those things, I had to be really prepared for how I was going to answer for that. So, I would say, I probably practiced that pitch and rehearsed my questions probably 50 times. Yeah. And look, you can't predict how it's going to go. I was super happy with how it turned out. And I was super grateful to the sharks. You didn't see a lot of this, but the sharks were frankly really kind to me and could have been a lot tougher. And so I was really grateful for it, but I had to have nerves of steel. I was a competitive athlete for over a decade. And I certainly think that has helped me prepare for big moments where you have to keep a calm head and you have to be able to go in and deliver because it's just, otherwise it's just not worth all the work that it took to get there.
Gotcha. Let's go back to talking about EverlyWell a little bit, just as far as specifics of, let's talk to those average people that you're talking about, the vast majority of people that have no idea why it's important to get your blood work done. What would you say to those people that, are like, okay, I get it. I guess I need to get my blood work done. What should they be looking for versus, you guys versus going to a traditional lab? What should they be looking for that's important as far as the testing and then also the results, specifically the results?
Yeah. So I think
interpreting them. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the testing, look, on average, should everyone listening be testing their cholesterol once a year? Probably. There are many different types of people who should be testing different markers more frequently, who maybe need a specific plan that they need to be on. For example, if you have a thyroid condition, you can get most of your thyroid testing done on a regular basis through us. I would not recommend that, obviously, for everyone. Mm-hmm. So there's a set of tests that I think you can look at doing regularly for all Americans, be it cholesterol, vitamin D, HbA1c. I think these are really important core markers. And then there's, of course, specialty markers that are maybe condition focused or things that in a particular life stage you might be interested. For example, our testosterone test or a fertility panel. So I think that we cover kind of the gamut of whatever a consumer needs for their particular lifestyle, you can access it on our platform. I think that when you get the results, and how you should think about lab testing in general is you don't need to be over testing too often. That is not the goal for the average American. Yeah. But what's really important to keep in mind as you look at your results is that lab ranges and reference ranges for, normal, low, and high, or normal, abnormal, either way, are generally set by the lab, and there's generally accepted ranges for each marker. Yep. You in particular, if you're female, if you're male, if you're in a certain demographic, your own body may run at a different level. And knowing that information over time and actually having access to that and tracking it is far more insightful, both for you and for your physicians, than saying, hey, I took a cholesterol test once. You have one of my values. It's elevated, but we have no idea what that means in context. Mm-hmm. And so for us, it's really about practical lab management over time where you know your numbers. I would love for every American to know their vitamin D, to know their HbA1c, to know their cholesterol, and to actually know what's normal for them. And that's a lot of what we're trying to bring to the results platform and education. And it's a little bit different than a lot of quantified selfers where they're getting very tactical and specific in some very detailed markers that may not be relevant for everyone. Yeah. We are fundamentally saying, how can we make lab testing like as an over-the-counter pregnancy test or like a supplement that you buy? Yeah. How can we have you bake it into your everyday health and wellness in a reasonable capacity where it's something that you just do as part of your health management?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing I love about you guys is making the results very easy to understand. And you even give suggestions of how to maybe improve those markers, right? So I think it's very simple for your average person to, okay, here's my results. This is what the results are. This is what it means. This is how I can improve it. And hopefully it's up to them to actually take those action steps to improve those levels. But I'll get into what I love about EverlyWell at the end. So we'll save that for the end. Can you go over all the specific tests that you guys offer currently?
Yes, we now have over 30, Drew, which
Wow,
I know you'll find hard to
crazy.
believe.
How many did you guys have when I worked with you?
Three. We had three in 2016.
That's
and now
right.
we're over 30. Super excited.
Yeah.
They range from $39 to $399, depending on complexity. On average, each panel is significantly less expensive than definitely what you'll pay out of pocket, but also generally, depending on your insurance deductible, is going to be cheaper out of pocket even compared to that. So, and they're all HSA and FSA covered. So they range, we generally have categories. So we have general wellness categories, which is food sensitivity, which is a top seller, vitamin D, sleep and stress, which is cortisol and melatonin, and a few other panels like that, heavy metals, et cetera. Then we have women's health, which covers everything from our new HPV test all the way to perimenopause, postmenopause, and fertility, men's health, which is a variety of different hormone tests for men, and then we have STI testing, so comprehensive plus individual marker tests for STI. So we're always launching new tests. We'll probably have another handful through the end of the year. I, of course, forgot to mention cholesterol and HbA1c fall into general wellness, but we've tried to kind of cover what we hear most from, when we look at new tests, we think what is clinically relevant, what can we make affordable, but still enough markers to be relevant to the condition that we're trying to package. And then how can we make sure that this is going to be easily communicated and valuable to the consumer? Because there is a sense of like, if we do something way too complex, is it really going to communicate value to the consumer? So we're balancing all those things when we develop our tests.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's go back to the food sensitivity test. What is that and what is it not? Because I want to know, like, can it tell you if you have celiac or gluten sensitivity, or what are the specifics of the food sensitivity? Because I think that might be one of the more popular ones, right?
It is.
Yeah.
There's about 5 really popular ones, and that's one of them. And that was actually our first test to launch, so has kind of also gained in referral popularity. And we actually have the largest database of food sensitivity data, I think, in the country. So it's really cool. There's some interesting insights we'll be kind of publishing from that, but. It is not, one thing about food sensitivities and intolerances, they are not allergies. And they're not immediate response anaphylactic allergies. And it's really important to differentiate that, because you may have a food allergy and you may have a food sensitivity, and they may be totally different. And they're mediated by, so anaphylactic allergies are mediated by an IgE response. Intolerances and sensitivities are mediated by delayed antibody responses of IgG or IgA. So our test specifically measures 96 foods and your IgG reactivity to those 96 foods. It is best used as a guide path for an elimination plan. We just released a ton of new content on our results platform written by our medical director on how to think about crafting your elimination plan based on results. It is our most, what I would call, we get more reviews about that test changing people's lives.
Really?
And specifically because they've had issues, they haven't been able to pinpoint them. But, we do recommend that you do it with an elimination plan and then reintroduce the foods. And what we find is people are really affected and say, oh my gosh, I now realize why I shouldn't be eating that food. But it's important to differentiate, one, from an allergy test, and two, to your earlier question, it cannot diagnose you for celiac. That is a combination of blood tests, usually a biopsy, as well as a number of other types of markers. And so, you may have but it's also helpful for people who maybe did the celiac process, didn't have celiac, still feel like they may have a gluten sensitivity, and are really looking to understand if they are reactive to gluten in a different way.
What are some of the most popular foods that people have sensitivities to based on the test?
So gluten is actually not number one.
Okay.
The top 10 are things like wheat, yeast. Gluten is in there. A variety. We do specifics around dairy, so everything from cow's milk to different cheeses, because there's actually different proteins that make up those different forms of dairy, yogurt, etc. But different types of dairy, barley. So those tend to be the most common sensitivities. And honestly, what we found in our data is a limited number of people have really high reactivities, but which is how it should be, right? We don't tell everyone that they have super high reactivities, but some people find that even where they have moderate reactivities or mid-level, when they eliminate those foods, and then they reintroduce them, those were actually, causing symptoms for them. And so it's been fascinating to see. And I think is frankly super important with what's happened with our food supply in the last kind of 15 years to understand this better. And there's really a limited body of research on it right now, despite the pop culture talk around food intolerance and sensitivities.
Gotcha.
So we're excited to kind of better contribute to that and help people understand what these are and what they aren't.
Gotcha. So part of me does not want to take the test because it might end up being some foods that I love, Like I think one of my friends did the test and they're like, what? I have a sensitivity to almonds and they love almonds and almond butter. And they're like, what am I supposed to do? But it's interesting. Actually, that's one I haven't done. I haven't done food sensitivity yet. But maybe I'll be brave enough to do it.
It would be great, Drew, actually, if we had you do the food sensitivity test, do the elimination plan, and then reintroduce, and then our executive medical director could walk you through that.
That would be, okay, that's a great idea. We will make that happen.
Securing future podcast.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great idea. What is the elimination plan exactly? Is it 30 days, get rid of those foods, and then re-implement it after 30 days? Is that the protocol?
There's two forms.
Okay.
Because some people just can't adhere to the stricter form. The strictest one that we really recommend is being able to actually eliminate one by one, and then reintroduce after 30 days. The alternative is you eliminate sort of a handful of your highest ones, and then reintroduce, and that shortens the timeline. So that's sort of called elimination with an add back. We do always recommend that you try to add back because that's where you really see how severely symptomatic you are, if at all. And so that's what we recommend. So, but there's multiple ways. I mean, you can read all about elimination diets. The goal is that, one, this exact test is offered by thousands of physicians and practitioners around the country. It's generally the exact same test is generally anywhere from $800 to $1,200 out of pocket.
Yeah.
We offer $199. And then point two is you can typically take those results, and then if you have a particular practitioner you're working with, or if you have a particular elimination plan you want to follow, we have our view on what works best, but you can implement that however you'd like.
And this is a blood test with prick of the finger?
3 drops.
3 drops. I'm curious to know the science behind how they can get so specific with the blood and a sensitivity to a certain food. Do you know that? Yeah, do you know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little, it's an ELISA panel. So it is a 96 tiny vials.
Okay.
And they punch microsamples, 96 microsamples from your card, and then expose it to the food. And so,
wow.
I mean, it's really interesting to see.
How do you get 96 microsamples? Because the circle is so small. You get 96?
I mean, it's a very small amount that they need. So,
okay.
So it's I can send you a video of the process, but it's a pretty, I mean, listen, generally that form of assay, an ELISA assay is a very old school form of testing. And I say this because it's proven, it's reliable, it's accurate, and the question of IgG accuracy it's super accurate.
Yeah.
The challenge around the research is how do IgG reactivities then correlate to everyone's symptoms, and that's why we recommend it. It's proven with an elimination plan.
Gotcha.
But we don't recommend people just blindly eliminate things and don't eat them without testing it out.
So it sounds like it's mostly grains and dairy that most people have sensitivities to.
Not that surprising, I suppose. But for some people, they find foods that they're highly reactive to that fundamentally changes their well-being and just their ability to live a normal life every day. And it's foods that they never would have thought of. And they eliminate them and then reintroduce them and they say, oh my gosh, this has totally changed my life. So.
Gotcha. I love that. So, I guess one of my last questions for you is why should people choose EverlyWell? Like, do you want people to choose EverlyWell over traditional labs? Do you feel like that's where it's headed now? And if so, why?
Well, in general, I think that the consumer movement toward convenient and great experience healthcare is here.
Yeah.
And I think that you will start to see Amazon and other brick and mortar players really move into the space aggressively, and players like Apple and Google. And I believe that 23andMe has done an excellent job over the last, think about 10 years ago. Would you ever have sent a biological specimen in the mail? No. And now millions of people are sending saliva samples in to get sequenced. That movement in and of itself has fundamentally changed how I think about at-home lab testing. I believe that this is the future of lab testing. Do I think it will replace 100%? No, I think actually what we're doing is expanding the pie of people being compliant and getting their testing done, and people getting tests done who never would have, ordered lab tests. So it's not really about, do I think people should choose it over other lab tests? I think it's about, what are your personal needs? What are your symptoms? We have a lot of people who pick us because they actually find it to be beneficial prior to getting a doctor's appointment. And sharing, we recommend people share the results with their physicians. And frankly, if you don't know what a test is going to cost you, we definitely recommend you use us. And many physicians are sending their patients to us because if you're on a high deductible plan, or if you are uninsured or underinsured, or if you have FSA and HSA, I will tell you, probably 20 people a day send us emails or live chat and say, well, what are you going to bill me after?
Yeah.
How much am I going to pay after? And when we say, we will never, ever charge you again, and you will get a full service that's physician reviewed and your results to access anytime, and it's, $70, they're blown away. And for some people, it's just the transparency of knowing they're not going to get a $500 bill. And so that is another situation where that's just becoming more and more common. That trend, unfortunately, is not going to stop. And that's something where I would say, like, we can provide a better service.
Yeah. So let me wrap up by saying what I love about EverlyWell, because I feel like this is what it's doing, in my opinion. It goes right along with my message of encouraging people to become their own self-experimentation. And if we could, give people the tools they need to become their own self-experimentation, it doesn't mean they're not going to need doctors anymore, but it just means that they are staying accountable to taking control of their own health rather than relying on a doctor to just look at their blood results, give them prescriptions, say, okay, here you go, and you don't question anything. This gives you the power in your own hands to say, okay, based off of this diet that I did the past 90 days, this is what my blood work looks like. I feel better, and my markers are telling me that I should be feeling better based on the markers that the blood tests I just did. And I feel like that is empowering for a lot of people, because then it's like, okay, I know now what's affecting my health. And for so long, we've been so fixated on health equals weight loss or health equals lower scale weight. There's so much more to health than just that. And I feel like you guys do an awesome job of making it accessible, making it convenient, making it affordable, and making the results really, really easy to understand. I think that's really important for your average person out there not to be intimidated by doing these tests, because it's super simple. When the box comes to your door, you unwrap it, you follow the instructions. It doesn't hurt. A little prick of the finger might hurt for some people, but in general, it's super simple. And you just send it off. It's prepaid. And it's super simple. You get the results back in an email. And even, wait, do you have it in an app now? I can't remember, or it's just on the website?
Well, it's on the website. You just log in, but you can do it for, we'll text you, we'll email you, and then you just log in. But it's it looks like an app on
exactly.
Mobile,
yeah, so. It's mobile friendly.
It's like an app quality.
It's super simple to understand exactly what your numbers are. And I love it because, yes, I am kind of a quote unquote biohacker. I like to see what changes I made in diet, nutrition, exercise has affected my blood work, because really that's what's optimal. You can't just go based off of just your body fat percentage and weight loss. There's so much more to being healthy than just that. And so that's what I love what you guys do. So I took about the last 10 minutes of our.
I was going to say I couldn't have said it better. I need to record you. And
I should have come on. I should have come on Shark Tank with you. Would have gotten you a better deal.
Exactly. So no, I couldn't have said it better. And I really appreciate you being a fan and just your steadfast support and loving what we're doing.
Yeah,
so.
I've always been a fan. Just to wrap up, what's new coming up? Anything that we should be on the lookout for with EverlyWell? Anything you can talk about or announce?
Yeah. So we just launched 2 omega-3 tests, basic and plus, which I think are super essential.
Yeah.
And again, you're probably many of the listeners are taking omega-3 supplements, DHA supplements. Like, do you know if they're working? Do you have any idea? Probably not. So I think this is sort of a companion to supplementation. And then the other thing is that tomorrow we are launching an HPV test, which is high risk 14, and I'm super passionate about this. So it is 14 high risk genotypes of HPV responsible for over 99% of cervical cancer cases in the U.S. And truly, this is why I started EverlyWell, is we are able to provide access for an $89 price point for women to get screened for these high-risk genotypes and for them to know what their risk level is for potentially contracting cervical cancer. And it's not a cancer screening test, but very similar to 23andMe or to a color genomics, it is more information for women to then be able to act on. And it's at an affordable price point, and you can do it at home. And I'm really, really hopeful. There was a study that came out just 2 weeks ago that said that it's in some ways more accurate than the pap smear, and that many doctors think it may eventually replace regular pap smears. Yeah. And so look, I mean, this is a Roche test. It's an example of like EverlyWell is able to partner with incredible technology companies and bring these tests to consumers. So just super excited about it, and doing more testing that actually increases public health access and increases research, and just is able to really bring that element into a mass market product, and not just for people who have a lot of money to spend, but something for everybody on the site.
Gotcha. Love that. And last question that just popped up in my head was, can parents have their kids take these tests? What do you guys say about that?
No, we're working on it.
Okay.
No, not yet. And really the tests are actually accurate for children. The issue is that for regulatory reasons, we have a physician validation process, and we would need to have some sort of electronic liability waiver. And so we're just not quite there yet, but it's coming. We know it's a huge ask, and we just have to sort out that piece and make sure that we're compliant.
Gotcha. That would be awesome. Just saying, one day.
I know. So, and Canada and all the things. So,
well, keep up the good work, Julia. Where can people find you? Your website, your social media platforms, and and yours too, because yours is entertaining too.
Yeah. So I'm at Julia T Cheek, like on your face, on Twitter and on LinkedIn, which is where I typically post. And then EverlyWell is everlywell.com, and EverlyWell _ between Everly and Well on Instagram and Twitter. And we're super pumped on Instagram. We are about to surpass 23andMe's following, all organic.
Wow.
A lot of time and content into that. We have a full-time person who is just amazing at it. So would really recommend, if you're looking for kind of good factoids and giveaways and things like that, follow us.
Love it. Thanks so much, Julia, for coming on. I just want to say thank you for what you do. I appreciate your vision, and you've helped so many people. So keep moving forward. I love it, and we'll be in touch. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Drew.
Okay, see ya. Bye.
Bye.